So this is session 19, and I wanted to start from where we left off, from session 18. One of our listeners had a really beautiful quote that I wanted to bring out today, because this is really, to me, the essence of the work. And part of me, at the end of session 18, I felt like that was a really good place to, if you feel like you have a natural pause in that at the end of session 18 is a really good place to listen and to really come to really feel what this quote was expressing. And session 18 was essentially finishing up the embryology, which we are going to review a little bit today, because I feel like it really is important. And some of the subtle energetic movements that you may feel in your meditations may actually be those embryonic forces that are present throughout life, throughout the making of a seed, the making of a flower, the making of a tree, the making of a human, the making of your own heart, the making of limbs, and coming out and expressing yourself literally, without resistance. And so if we notice those movements, and if we can learn how to pay attention to those movements, in a balanced and contained way, the energy is going to start to flow better for us. And so the quote that was spoken at the end of session 18 that I really wanted to highlight today, is, it just seemed to me we are conceived in love, that this divine force is just love. Right? And that came out of a discussion of of embryology, of how we are formed, of how we are, how this form manifests, from spirit or from soul, wherever you may want it to come from, and how it manifests. And so that's just perfect. If we get to that as a society, as a group, whatever it might be, I feel like that there would be a lot of healing in that. And because this divine force that is just love, should also almost make a T-shirt out of that, is present. It's been present for all of eternity. It's still present now, and it's going to continue to be present. It's not anything that we need to go searching for or looking for. It is right now. It is what is. It is what is helping to manifest this moment currently. And if we can partner with that in a way that doesn't have resistance, this is sort of when the beauty of life, to me, starts to, you become really aware of it. And with that awareness, there's sort of a heightening process that occurs to it. The quote continues, because it seems to me, regardless of the situation with our parents, we can still connect with that love and know how wanted we were by life itself. How wanted we were by life itself. And isn't that just soothing? Like, oh, wow. Regardless of the situation, because what's the situation with the parents? Well, probably a story. Maybe we've been told. Maybe some energy that we may feel. But if we can process that in a holistic, meditative way, that maybe we can get to that, we can still connect with that love and know how wanted we were by life itself. Right? This isn't me saying this. This is me quoting one of our listeners who was really taking in the beauty of the embryology and where we had come from for 18 sessions. And so I wanted to start there as the sort of a springboard into the next few sessions of really not challenging you in essence, but sort of encouraging you, right? Encouraging you. Can you start to open up to that relationship with love? With that love that brought us all into this world. And in doing so, what I wanted to do is review. I have two short videos that I'd like to show um, of the embryologic formation. And just to kind of bring us up to speed again, because the last video we watched was about 18 minutes and I dissected it quite extensively and we stopped it. And if you were with us or you weren't with us, whatever your background is of embryology, just take this in as the creation of your physical being, the creation of your physical body through which we are using the antennas that this physical body have to fully experience what life has to offer and to be able to hold all of that experience with peace, with some sort of peace, by slowly, whether you're not there yet or you will get there or whatever it might be, doing practices that help what we call increase that zone of tolerance, that increase that zone that your nervous system can hold, so that as you increase the zone of tolerance, you can hold more and 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 more experience. And this is where the titration comes in. What are you comfortable with? Where are you paying attention to? And how can you direct your attention to something that may be happening in your life, just in small little bits, enough for you to titrate them and incorporate them, but not so much where you get anxious or panic or have or have PTSD or something like that. Okay, so I am going to share my screen, and we are going to watch these videos. One is from the Imperial College in London. And just like sit back in that meditative state. All right, you should be able to see that screen. And there you are. All right, so just a few things that I wanted to point out here. Okay, so here they show this initial part. It's a bit out of focus, but they show the day 0, day 1, where you've already the egg has already been fertilized. It starts to undergo division. It continues to undergo division, and all that is that the cells inside divide. So you go from 1 to 2 to 4 to 8. Okay, and you continue to do this, and this is all while you're not implanted in the uterus yet. So this is as it's traveling down the fallopian tube. Day 3, day 4, right? It starts to change, starts to have this inner cell mass, and although this is the whole fertilized embryo, this is actually the part that's going to bring that. This is where we come from. This is what makes the actual body of the human, these cells in here. So you're supported. This is all fluid in here, right? You're supported in fluid, and then you're still traveling down the fallopian tube. So you're not actually connected to your mother yet, right? And you can see here how there's changing that's occurring in the cells. And now they sort of have this coming out here. And this is the implantation process, right? And this is a relationship between womb and embryo here. Okay. The womb has to be it has to be ready. The soil that the embryo is going to implant in has to be ready. There has to be a relationship between the egg or the fertilized embryo and the womb for the womb to say, "I'm taking you in, I'm bringing you in." Okay, if that relationship doesn't happen, this right is you essentially just pee it out. Okay, there is a relationship there where there's a morphing, right? So you get this morphing, and now you're inside the womb. Okay, now you're inside the uterus, and this is where they would say, pregnancy, has begun. And as it continues to morph and differentiate, right? The other part here is, okay, this part. So this is still the whole fertilized embryo. This is like a sheet. So we called it the 2-layered cake in session 18. So these are two cell layers. This is the only part that becomes us right here. Okay, and as it goes on, they show it as this plate. Okay, with 2 cell layers that then becomes 3 cell layers, and the primitive streak being the first midline structure, that we can visibly see, that actually directs a midline that creates our body plan of right and left and head and tail. Okay. And so this primitive streak actually becomes your spinal cord. And you see how it elongates, right? So which way you see it moving and elongating as well as expanding. It's wider out here. Okay. This is the part here that's going to become the brain. And so you may actually feel in some of your meditations this elongation or this expansion towards the head. Now they do a cross section here, and this is also important because when you're 2 cell layers, as you are here, here's 1 cell layer and here's another cell layer, as this is making this midline structure that's sort of like diving midline, the cells are dropping in and creating another layer, right? So the cells are actually dropping in and creating another layer, and the cells are migrating up towards the head because they need to form the brain. Right? You see how they migrate, and then they create a third layer there. So now you have a 3-layered cake. 1, 2, 3. All right, and you might actually feel this. You might actually feel as if there may be this energetic movement of sort of going down and out and coming up, almost like a fountain, almost like a fountain. Wow, there's this very symmetric movement that's on both sides. It's sort of expanding, coming out, coming up, which may be the embryonic movements and energies in your body still present today. Okay. Then it continues to expand, it continues to expand, it continues to expand, it continues to expand. And now you have the brain here. And guess what? Your head is resting on your heart. So resting on the heart. And you start to develop the appendages, our arms and legs from the sides here. Okay. Our arms and legs start to develop from the sides as well as the organs. So here's the developing heart, here's the developing brain. Right. And then here's the developing arm back here. So ear, eye, we all did this. This is the cool part about it, right? It's not like Linda did something different than I did. Like we did the same thing. It's kind of cool. Here's your umbilical cord, right? So this is the connecting, this is a stalk. So the umbilical cord, so if you touch your belly button, right, that's this. So you touch your belly button, there's an energetic connection with this stalk that is connecting you to your placenta. And so then as it develops, now it becomes a little fetus. And I love this posture, right? Do you ever have that experience in meditation where your arms are just sort of they almost feel so light that they're elevating, and you feel as if you're actually just like resting in fluid? Well, that was you, because everything around you here is the amniotic fluid. So this is you, right? Bathing in fluid. You're in this amniotic fluid, sort of floating around. And sometimes in meditation, you might actually have this sense of like raising your arm, and there's this energetic feel like it's floating. But you're fully embodied. You're not disembodied. It's not like you're floating and you're disassociating from your body. You're fully embodied. Okay. This is from the Howard Hughes Medical Institute. This is a professor, also really short, 2 minutes, but it sort of takes that whole thing and compresses it. And so that's kind of the essence that I'm trying to give for you today. Okay.
And we'll look at the beginning of development, looking into the ovary at an unfertilized egg. It then gets fertilized by sperm, which travel down the fallopian tube. So here, millions of sperm coming along. Several of them will hit the egg and try to penetrate it, but one will win, as it were, go into the nucleus. And then there's a reprogramming process where the male and female nuclei have their genes set aside to be turned on and off for early development.
So here's so when you see this thing kind of moving, right? That's the image of this, right? This fertilized embryo now going down the fallopian tube, right? Imagine, right, have you ever been in a water slide and it's like covered and you're going down, you like don't know where it's going? Okay, that's all right. And do you see how it's already, so it's gone from 1 to 2, and you'll see it continuing dividing. Okay.
Here you see early cleavage stages occurring, and this is one of the early growth phases. As the embryo moves down the fallopian tube, it's going to form an important stage called the blastocyst here in a few seconds.
So it's still going down the fallopian tube, right? So this is fully, it's sort of like this is, it has everything it needs to survive for the first 7 days. That cell, what the mother's egg had in it, had enough nutrients for this thing to divide multiple times and to survive for 7 days. Okay. Is it connected to any oxygen source? No. Is it connected to any blood supply? No. It's floating. It's literally like going down the fallopian tube. Okay.
Of course, in real life, that takes days, about 5 days. At this stage, then, I'd like to draw your attention to the inside of the blastocyst, where there are cells called the inner cell mass, which I'll be abbreviating as ICM. Those are the cells that make the entire animal. And the
An animal is us, right? We're animals, so.
outer cells give rise to the placenta and other supporting tissues. At this stage, the embryo implants into the wall of the uterus. This is when a pregnancy is really initiated. And now we'll see those blue inner cell mass cells form a disc, and then as the cells continue to grow, they change their physical position.
So there's your disc. Whoa. These cells, right? So this inner cell mass actually starts to form a disc. We call it a bilaminar, 2 layers, right? That's our 2-layered disc. Okay. And here, the thing that people don't usually point out are the fluids that are surrounding the disc, and that's why this is important. Okay, on one side of this disc, you actually start to form the amniotic cavity. The amniotic cavity then becomes, and we'll kind of go into that next session. But to bring to mind, here you are, right? Here's the physical part, but then look at the surrounding fluids here that are helping to support you, right?
Their kind of geographical relationship to one another. And you'll see that represented here as this disc gets transformed into an embryo. Those lines represent sites where cells are migrating in and out.
Migrating, you see the primitive streak, the midline. You see this bulge occurring? Now that you know, and you've gone through this class 5 times now, this bulge is going to become the brain, right? So he uses the term migrating, right? Imagine the energetic forces that actually are responsible without our mental input, right? A lot of consciousness in this, but no mental input. These cells dive down and migrate. They know exactly where to migrate to create all the organs, all the body structures in what they need to do. And this migration that occurs down and up, down and up.
And here's an important stage when the 3 beginning layers of the embryo, the so-called germ layers, are formed, and I'll come back to that in a few minutes.
See the elongation?
As development proceeds, there's more growth and movement of cells. It'll begin to form a neural tube. Here it turns, and appendages start to bud out. You see the head forming and the eye, and then eventually we get a small embryo, and some months later, of course, this would be born as a young baby.
Okay, so that's you and I. Okay, those are 2 really good videos that sort of take that whole 18-minute thing and really compress it, and whatnot, right? So one of the things that has always been interesting to me is, even in embryologic development, is all the supporting fluids that we come into contact with, right? All the supporting fluids. When you have those 2 layered at the very beginning, right? Even with that inner cell mass, you have that fluid in front. When you become a 2-layered disc, you have the fluid on top of the disc, and you essentially have the fluid on the bottom of the disc, right? Very few people talk about those fluids, okay? But what I want to take you from is the physical, right? So like, right, you can, the bone, the muscle, what we see, and kind of drop down from the physical into what we call the fascia, or the fluid layers that inform our body, right? The fascia or fluid layers that inform our body. And realistically, the definition of fascia is actually changing. And I sent Linda a PDF of an article that was published that's titled "The Shape and Function of Solid Fascia." The shape and function of solid fascias depend on the presence of liquid fascias. So the shape and function of our solid, what we become as solid humans, actually depends on the presence of the liquid fascia that's in essence prior to and informing the solid fascia. Okay, so imagine fascia as, the best way that I can describe it is sort of it's a continuum. Okay, so you have so fascia can be everything from connective tissue to lining of the organs, but think of it as like a connective tissue. Okay, a very intricate uh, matrix of connective tissue that sort of provides a scaffold for a physical structure. Okay. Um, and so they have a definition. So in this PDF, they have it's actually interesting. They have a nomenclature committee to define fascia. All right. And so they say the fascial system includes adipose, fat, adventitia, neurovascular sheaths, aponeuroses, deep and superficial fascia, dermis, which is the skin, epineurium, joint capsules, ligaments, right? The things that connect bones, membranes, meninges, which is in our brain, myofascial expansions, periosteum, so the outer lining of the bone, retinaculum, septae, tendons, visceral fascia that's present on the organs, and all the intramuscular and intermuscular connective tissues. Intramuscular, between muscles, and intermuscular connective tissues. If you eat meat and you get the like a raw steak and you sort of maybe like you expand it and you see that white, there's like a white sort of connective tissue, sometimes between maybe two planes of muscle. That's fascia. That's that would be intermuscular fascia, for instance. Yeah. What is not taken into consideration when trying to understand how to correctly apply this model is the function of the body fluids. So what he's writing, and I totally agree with this, and this is where we're going, our vision of what should be considered a fascia also includes body fluids. Body fluids. Why? Because to me, if you look at the composition of body fluids, it's a less dense version of connective tissue. All right, it just becomes a continuum. Sort of like, where does fluid become physical? Where does it become solid? Right? Where does when does ice become water, or vice versa? Okay. The fascia in any tissue that contains features capable of responding to mechanical stimuli, the fascial continuum, there's that word, is the result of the evolution of a perfect synergy among different tissues, liquids, and solids capable of supporting, dividing, penetrating, feeding, and connecting all the regions of the body, from the epidermis to the bone, from the skin to the bone, involving all its functions and organic structures. The continuum constantly transmits and receives information that can influence the shape and function of the entire body. This continuum, this fascia, this liquid fascia continuing into a solid fascia, constantly is transmitting information. All right, am I squeezing my hands? What am I holding? This is just from even a mechanical perspective, right? If I'm shearing if something is shearing my hand, this is actually transmitting information that I understand. Can my skin and my bones and my tissue tolerate that? Right? In this definition, these tissues include epidermis, dermis, which is the skin, fat, blood, lymph, blood and lymphatic vessels, tissue covering the nervous system, the nervous filaments, voluntarily striated muscle fibers, and the tissues covering and permeating it, ligaments, tendons, aponeurosis, cartilage, bone, meninges, and tongue. All right. And then they go on to say the human body is made up of fluids from its entirety to the individual cell. Without the presence of fluids, the human body or the single cell could not adapt, could not survive, and would not have the shape we know. All right. Would not have the shape we know. Do you remember when you were a single cell mass, that fluid? Do you remember when you were a bilaminar disc, the fluids that were on top and on the bottom? Okay. And we'll go into more detail of how those fluids start informing our nervous system. The human body contains different fluids or fascia liquid. So this is liquid fascia, right? So this is liquid connective tissue. I've called the cerebrospinal fluid like a liquid crystalline matrix with different tasks. Fantastic. All fluids come into contact with each other. The same cannot be said for muscles or bones or solid fascia. We can recognize blood, lymph, cellular fluids, and cerebrospinal fluid, right? And I'll stop there. Here's the cool part. Okay. All the fluids, regardless of if you're blood or cerebrospinal fluid or lymph, they all can make contact with each other. They all might become each other. So calling one cerebrospinal fluid just because it's in the middle of your brain, or blood because it's in your blood vessels, if it just goes through a different process or goes through a filtration system, now you have blood becoming cerebrospinal fluid. And then you have lymph. If it comes back to your heart, now the lymph becomes blood. But I can't say that about your foot bone and your hand bone. They're very distinct sort of physical, entities. Now we can get to it on an elemental basis, which we will, but not yet. Okay. And so what I wanted to do for this, for this meditation today is, as we go into our meditation, keep in mind the embryological forces that have been present from the initiation of your creation, from that developing embryo. Okay. See if you can connect with that divine love that you were conceived in from life itself, Okay. And see if we can start to sort of deconstruct the physical and go gently into the fascia, right? Gently into the fascia. Okay. Now, if at any point you become uncomfortable, for instance, or you feel like you're tensing up or something like that, remember, we go back to our resource, right? We go back to our anchor. We go back to something that we feel like we can pay attention to, that we feel safer. Okay.